There's something hauntingly familiar about the flickering glow of a torch against a cave wall, the way shadows dance across ancient paintings that have survived for tens of thousands of years. Picture this: you're standing deep underground, surrounded by towering images of bison, horses, and handprints pressed into the rock as if reaching out from the past. These aren't just random marks or decorations, they're a message, a bridge between us and the minds of our earliest ancestors. What were they trying to tell us? What drove them to venture into these dark, dangerous spaces to create art that would outlast civilizations? The caves of Lascaux in France, the winding chambers of Altamira in Spain, the hidden galleries of Sulawesi in Indonesia. These places hold more than just pigment on stone. They're snapshots of human consciousness awakening. Think about it: 30,000 years ago, while survival was a daily struggle against hunger, predators, and the elements, someone paused to mix ochre and charcoal, to trace the curves of an animal's back, to leave their handprint as a whisper of, "I was here." This wasn't just art for art's sake. It was storytelling, ritual, maybe even a way to make sense of a world they couldn't fully control. So why does this matter to us today? Because these caves are like time capsules, preserving the moment humanity began to think beyond mere survival. Those handprints, they're not so different from the ones kids press into clay today. The animals painted in motion, their legs overlapping to suggest running. That's an early form of animation, a desire to capture life in stillness. And the recurring symbols, the dots, the zigzags, could they be the first attempts at written language? As we journey through these ancient galleries, we're not just studying history, we're uncovering the roots of what makes us human: creativity, curiosity, and the need to connect across time. So let's step into the darkness together and see what these caves can teach us about who we are and who we've always been. What if I told you those ancient bison and handprints weren't just decorations, they were the first sparks of human imagination catching fire? When early humans painted a charging bull or a cluster of dots, they weren't just copying what they saw. They were inventing symbols, a mental revolution as profound as the discovery of fire. Imagine the leap it took to go from making tools for survival to creating something with no obvious purpose, a mark that stood for an idea, not just an object. That's the birth of symbolic thought, the moment our ancestors stopped merely reacting to the world and started interpreting it. Take the famous spotted horses of Pech Merle Cave in France. Scientists once assumed these polka-dotted animals were realistic portrayals until they realized no wild horses had such patterns. Those dots weren't mistakes. They were deliberate symbols, possibly representing star constellations or spiritual concepts we can only guess at today. And that's the key: these images weren't just art. They were a new way of thinking. A horse wasn't just a horse anymore. It could be a sign of luck, a prayer for a successful hunt, or a map of the night sky. This cognitive shift changed everything. Suddenly, humans could share complex ideas across generations without relying on gestures or demonstrations. A handprint wasn't just a handprint. It might mean, "This is my place," or "I belong to this group." Zigzags could tell the story of a river's path or the rhythm of the seasons. And when multiple caves across Europe show the same red dots or ladder-like shapes, it hints at shared beliefs stretching across hundreds of miles, a kind of prehistoric internet of symbols. But here's the most fascinating part. This mental breakthrough didn't just give us art, it built the scaffolding for everything that followed: language. You need symbols to turn sounds into words. Religion, symbols let humans conceive of unseen forces. Even trade and social structures rely on shared meanings, a promise sealed with a handprint, a territory marked by painted signs. Those cave walls weren't just canvases. They were the first classrooms, churches, and storybooks all rolled into one. So the next time you text an emoji or hang a flag, remember, you're using a mental tool first invented by someone kneeling in torchlight, turning pigment into meaning 30,000 years ago. Theories about why early humans painted these magnificent cave images are as varied as the caves themselves. One of the oldest explanations is the idea of hunting magic, that by painting an animal on the wall, hunters could somehow influence the real creature's fate. Picture a group crouched in flickering torchlight, tracing the outline of an aurochs, believing that capturing its image would give them power over it in the hunt. This wasn't just superstition. It was early humans trying to assert control over an unpredictable world. Some caves even show spears or arrows painted over the animals, as if the act of drawing the hunt could make it real. But not all scholars agree. Another compelling theory suggests these caves were sacred spaces like prehistoric cathedrals. Deep underground, far from daylight, the act of painting might have been part of shamanic rituals. The flickering torchlight, the echoing chambers, the overwhelming presence of animals emerging from the stone. It's easy to see how these spaces could feel like gateways to another world. In this view, the artists weren't just painters. They were spiritual guides, using images to commune with forces beyond ordinary life. Some caves even show strange hybrid creatures, part human, part animal, which could represent spirit beings or visions from altered states of consciousness. Then there's the practical side. Could these paintings have been the first textbooks? Imagine a seasoned hunter pointing to the image of a charging mammoth, teaching the young how to read its body language, where to strike, how to avoid its tusks. The detailed anatomy in many paintings, the way muscles bunch, the angle of a leg mid-gallop suggests deep observation passed down through generations. And in a world without writing, visual storytelling might have been the best way to preserve survival knowledge. What's fascinating is that none of these theories cancel each other out. Early humans likely didn't separate art, religion, and education the way we do today. A single painting could be a prayer, a lesson, and a masterpiece all at once. The more we study these caves, the more we realize how rich and layered their thinking was, not primitive, but profoundly sophisticated. Whether they were seeking control, connection, or knowledge, one thing is clear. These artists were asking the same big questions that still drive us today. Why are we here? How do we make sense of the world? And how do we leave our mark before we're gone? Survival for early humans wasn't just a matter of strength or speed. It was a mental game, a chess match played against nature itself. Look closely at those cave walls and you'll notice something striking. The animals painted aren't just any creatures. They're the ones that pose the greatest threat: mammoths with tusks like spears, lions frozen mid-snarl, aurochs bristling with raw power. These weren't random choices. They were deliberate studies of the very predators that could end a life in seconds. By capturing them in pigment, early humans were doing more than just recording what they saw. They were taming their fears, turning the unknown into something they could confront, even master. Think of it like a prehistoric field guide. Before the hunt, a group might gather in the cave's dim light, tracing the outline of a bison, noting the curve of its horns, the way its muscles tensed before a charge. Some paintings even show spears piercing an animal's flank or arrows lodged in its side, not as celebrations of the kill, but as blueprints for survival. These images could have been a way to strategize, to rehearse the hunt before stepping into the real danger. It's the earliest form of visualization training, a technique athletes and soldiers still use today. But there's another layer here. These paintings weren't just about outsmarting prey, they were about bonding the group. Imagine the stories told around those flickering torches, the near misses, the close calls, the legends of the one that got away. A wounded mammoth painted on the wall might represent a shared victory, a reminder that together they could face even the most terrifying beasts. And in a world where isolation meant death, that sense of unity was as vital as any weapon. The most fascinating part, this wasn't just practical training, it was emotional armor. By externalizing their fears, giving them shape and color on the wall, early humans were doing something profoundly modern, managing stress. Today, we might journal or talk through our anxieties. 30,000 years ago, they painted them. Those caves became sanctuaries where fear could be transformed into something tangible, something they could literally stand up to. So the next time you face a challenge, remember, you're tapping into an ancient instinct. Our ancestors didn't just survive by running or fighting. They survived by thinking, creating, and turning their deepest fears into art. Deep inside the caves, far beyond the reach of daylight, the walls seemed to pulse with something more than just paint. These weren't casual doodles in convenient locations. They were hidden in labyrinthine passages, tucked behind narrow crevices, sometimes even in chambers so cramped you'd have to crawl on your belly to reach them. Why go to such extremes? One compelling answer lies in the rituals of shamanism. Picture a lone figure, perhaps wrapped in animal hides, moving by the faint glow of a grease lamp into the earth's deepest recesses. The further they went, the more the outside world faded until all that remained was the rhythmic drip of water, the echo of their breath, and the flickering shadows that made the painted animals seem to move. This wasn't just a canvas, it was a sacred space, a doorway to the unseen. Some of the most intriguing images in these caves aren't the lifelike animals but the abstract patterns, swirling lines, grids, and clusters of dots that appear again and across continents. Researchers studying indigenous cultures have noticed something striking. These same patterns emerge in the art of modern shamanic traditions, often described as visions seen during trances induced by drumming, fasting, or even natural hallucinogens. The zigzags, they match the phosphenes our brains generate in altered states, those pulsing shapes we see when we close our eyes tightly or enter deep meditation. The dots, they could represent the stars of the spirit world or the pulse of a heartbeat echoing in the darkness. And then there are the eerie hybrid figures, part human, part bison or bird, which might depict shamans mid-transformation, their souls journeying as animals to retrieve knowledge or healing. This wasn't mere superstition. For early humans, the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds was porous. A successful hunt, a healed wound, a change in the seasons, these weren't just random events. They were negotiations with forces beyond ordinary sight. The caves, with their echoing acoustics and disorienting darkness, became amplifiers for the mind. The repetitive act of painting, dipping fingers in pigment, tracing the same lines over and over, could have been a form of meditation, a way to slip between worlds. And the images themselves, they might have served as anchors, helping the shaman navigate the chaos of visions and return with something vital, a prophecy, a cure, or a story to strengthen the tribe. What's remarkable is how this practice mirrors our own search for meaning today. Modern neuroscience shows that altered states, whether from meditation, music, or ritual, activate the same brain regions responsible for creativity and problem-solving. Those early shamans weren't just escaping reality, they were tapping into a mental toolkit that helped their communities survive. When they painted a wounded bison healing or a rain symbol over a drought-stricken land, they were doing what scientists do in labs or artists do in studios, reimagining the world to change it. So the next time you lose yourself in a song or a daydream, remember, you're walking a path first painted in torchlight 30,000 years ago. Among the most intimate traces our ancestors left behind are those ghostly handprints pressed onto cave walls, some small enough to belong to children, others bearing the scars of hard-lived lives. Picture pressing your palm against cold stone, blowing pigment around it, and stepping back to see your shadow self lingering long after you're gone. These aren't just marks, they're frozen moments of connection across millennia. But why would someone crawl deep into a cave's belly just to leave this simple imprint? One theory suggests these were the first signatures, a way to say, I made this or I was here. In caves like El Castillo in Spain, handprints clustered near paintings, almost like artists claiming their work, a prehistoric version of signing a masterpiece. Then there are the chilling handprints with missing fingers. At Garga's cave in France, over 100 stencils show hands with shortened or absent digits. At first glance, it's easy to assume tragic accidents or frostbite in brutal Ice Age winters, but look closer, the missing segments are too clean, too uniform. Some researchers argue these were deliberate ritual amputations, perhaps as offerings to spirits or rites of passage. Compare this to indigenous cultures today, where finger removal symbolizes mourning or spiritual vows. Other scholars counter that the missing fingers might simply be bent during the stenciling process, a trick of posture rather than sacrifice, the most poignant possibility. These caves were classrooms. In some sites, small handprints overlap with larger ones, like a child's hand guided by an adult's. Could pressing a palm to the wall have been part of initiation rites, a way to mark a young hunter's first step into responsibility? Or consider the placement. Many handprints appear in chambers that resonate with echoes, where a single clap reverberates like thunder. Perhaps the act of making the print was accompanied by chants or drumming, sealing a promise to the community. What's undeniable is the raw humanity in these imprints. Unlike the majestic animals painted with such skill, the handprints are imperfect, smudged, uneven, sometimes trembling. They don't showcase talent, they showcase presence. In that way, they bridge time more powerfully than any artifact. When you see a handprint from 20,000 years ago, you're not just studying history. You're high-fiving a person who laughed, feared, and wondered about their place in the world just like you. That's the real magic of these caves. They remind us that consciousness, curiosity, and the need to say, I exist, aren't modern inventions. They're etched in our bones, as old as the first hand pressed in wonder against a wall, saying to the darkness, here I am. The animals that roam the walls of ancient caves aren't just lifelike portraits, they're a language of symbols, each creature carrying layers of meaning we're only beginning to decode. Take the lions of Chauvet Cave, their muscular bodies frozen mid-stride. In a world where humans weren't yet the apex predators, these big cats likely represented more than just danger. They could have embodied raw power, a spirit to channel during hunts, or even a clan's identity. Think of them as prehistoric mascots. Similarly, the horses painted across European caves, their manes flowing like rivers, might not just depict herds but concepts, freedom, movement, perhaps even the changing seasons as they migrated across ancient landscapes. This idea of animals as symbols ties into a practice found in cultures worldwide: totemism. For many indigenous groups, then and now, certain animals aren't just creatures, they're ancestors, protectors, or teachers. A bear might symbolize courage, a raven cunning, a salmon perseverance. Early humans could have seen their own lives mirrored in these animals' struggles and strengths. Imagine a clan that identified with the bison's resilience, painting them not just to honor the creature but to absorb its spirit. The act of painting might have been a way to commune with that power, to say, we are this too. But here's where it gets fascinating. These symbols weren't static. A mammoth in one cave might represent abundance, while in another, it could signify the Earth's raw, untamed force. The way animals overlap or face each other in compositions suggests stories. A lion confronting a bison might depict an epic struggle between rival clans or the balance of predator and prey. Even the materials used hold clues. Red ochre, often made from iron-rich earth, could link an animal to blood, life, or the land itself. Black charcoal from fire might tie a creature to transformation or the spirit world. What's striking is how these ancient symbols still resonate. Modern logos, eagles for nations, wolves for sports teams, tap into the same primal connections. Those cave painters weren't just artists, they were the first brand designers, using imagery to unite groups and convey values. So the next time you see an animal emblem, remember, you're witnessing a tradition that began when someone dipped their fingers in pigment and reached for the wall, not just to depict nature, but to become part of its story. Picture a cave wall not as a static canvas, but as the world's first movie screen. In the dim glow of torchlight, early humans didn't just paint animals, they choreographed entire dramas. At Lascaux, a falling bison arches its spine in agony, its entrails spilling toward a sprawled human figure with a bird-like head. Nearby, a rhinoceros seems to walk away indifferently. This isn't a random collection of images. It's a scene frozen in time, a hunt gone wrong, a tragedy remembered, perhaps a warning to future generations. These aren't mere pictures, they're chapters in humanity's oldest surviving story. What makes these narratives so revolutionary is their complexity. In the Spanish cave of La Pasiega, archaeologists found a sequence of red deer painted across 19 panels, each figure slightly more elongated than the last, as if mid-stride. Viewed by torchlight while moving through the passage, the effect is uncanny. The deer appear to run across the stone. It's an early form of animation, a flipbook carved into the earth itself. Other caves show herds migrating, hunters encircling prey, even what might be ceremonial dances, each composition arranged to unfold like a visual epic. This storytelling instinct did more than entertain. It encoded survival. A painting of a wounded mammoth with spears in its flank wasn't just art, it was a textbook. The angle of the spears, the mammoth's defensive posture, the position of the hunters, all these details could teach crucial strategies. In a world without writing, these visual stories became living libraries. A single cave wall might hold generations of hard-won knowledge, which plants healed fevers, where to find migrating herds, how to read weather signs in animal behavior. But the most profound power of these stories was their ability to bind communities together. Shared myths create shared identity. When a group gathered to retell the tale of the great hunt or the spirit that brought the rains, they weren't just recalling events. They were reinforcing what it meant to belong. Those cave walls became the original campfire, the place where I became we. Today, we binge shows or scroll through feeds, hungry for connection. 30,000 years ago, they found it in the flickering shadows of painted bison, understanding even then that survival wasn't just about outrunning predators. It was about outlasting them together, one story at a time. The ingenuity behind these ancient paintings isn't just in what they depict, it's in how they were made. Imagine standing in a cave 30,000 years ago with no art supply store in sight. Every color, every tool had to be coaxed from the earth itself. Red and yellow ochre came from iron-rich clay, ground into powder between stones. Charcoal from spent fires provided deep blacks, while manganese oxides offered startling violets and browns. But these weren't just dumped onto the walls. Early artists mixed their pigments with surprising sophistication, binding them with animal fats, plant juices, or even saliva to create paints that could last millennia. Some mixtures were so advanced, they included extenders like crushed bone or quartz to add texture or adjust drying times. This wasn't slapdash doodling. It was chemistry in its earliest form. Now picture applying these paints without a single modern brush. Artists used whatever was at hand, frayed twigs for broad strokes, patches of fur or moss dabbed onto surfaces, even their own fingers to blend and shade. In caves like Pechmerle, researchers found evidence of hollow reeds or bones used to spray pigment, creating gradients so smooth they resemble airbrushing. The famous spotted horses, those perfect dots, were likely made by dipping a fingertip in paint or using a primitive stencil, and the precision is staggering. At Chauvet Cave, artists exploited the natural contours of the rock to give animals three-dimensional volume. A bison's shoulder might bulge where the stone swelled, its legs disappearing into cracks to suggest motion. This wasn't just art, it was an early form of virtual reality, transforming static walls into living landscapes. What's truly humbling is the intentionality behind every mark. In some caves, artists built scaffolding from wood or stacked stones to reach ceilings over 20 feet high. They planned compositions meticulously, etching preliminary sketches with flint tools before applying pigment. And they worked with the environment. In the flickering light of animal fat lamps, water seeping down walls made paintings appear to move, shadows animating herds across stone. Some chambers even seemed deliberately chosen for their acoustics, where the echo of a chant might mimic thunder or a stampede. This level of craftsmanship shatters the myth that early humans were primitive survivalists with no room for creativity. The time invested grinding pigments, crafting tools, scaling cave walls proves art wasn't a luxury. It was as essential as a sharp spear or a warm fire. Maybe more so, because while a spear fed the body, these paintings fed something deeper. The need to make meaning, to leave proof that someone stood here, looked at the world, and dared to recreate it. Every stroke whispers the same truth. Survival isn't just about living, it's about feeling alive. Step into one of these ancient caves, and you might notice something strange. The deeper you go, the more the walls seem to sing. Recent discoveries reveal that many cave paintings cluster in chambers with extraordinary acoustics, places where a single clap reverberates like thunder or a low hum lingers in the air like a ghost. It's no coincidence, early humans didn't just see these spaces, they felt them. At sites like France's Niox Cave, red dots and bison appear precisely where echoes are strongest, as if the artists were marking hotspots where sound came alive. And in Spain's El Castillo Cave, handprints crowd a ceiling that magnifies whispers into choruses. This wasn't just decoration, it was design. Scientists using 3D sound mapping have found that painted areas often resonate at frequencies between 90 and 120 Hz, the same range that induces trance states in shamanic rituals today. Imagine standing in that darkness, chanting or drumming as the cave's walls answered back, the vibrations thrumming through your bones. The paintings might have served as visual anchors in these sonic journeys, their flickering forms appearing to move in the shifting light. Some chambers even contain stalactites that ring like bells when struck, suggesting early humans didn't just use sound, they played the cave itself like an instrument. But the connection runs deeper. Many animal paintings face inward toward the cave's heart, positioned so that voices would seem to emanate from their mouths. A painted bison might speak through echoes, blurring the line between art and animism. And in caves like Tuc d'Audebert in France, footprints preserved in clay showed children dancing in circles near clay sculptures, proof that these spaces thrummed with life, rhythm, and collective energy. This multisensory approach reveals a profound truth. Early humans experienced the world in layers. A cave wasn't just a shelter or gallery, it was a living, breathing entity. The paintings weren't separate from the drumming or the dancing. They were part of a single ritual tapestry, weaving sight, sound, and movement into something greater. Today, we might scroll past images in silence or listen to music with eyes closed. But 30,000 years ago, art wasn't something you observed. It was something you entered, body and soul, letting the cave's ancient song carry you beyond the visible world. For generations, the image of the cave artist has been a familiar one, a burly, fur-clad man, crouched by torchlight, sketching mammoths with a charred stick. But science is rewriting that story. Detailed studies of ancient handprints reveal something startling. Many of those silhouettes are too small and delicate to belong to adult males. In fact, nearly half match the proportions of women's hands, and some even align with adolescents. This isn't just a footnote in history, it's a seismic shift in how we understand prehistoric creativity. Look closer at the caves and the evidence deepens. At Pech Merle in France, among the iconic spotted horses, there's a haunting silhouette known as the Venus of the Cave, a stylized female figure with exaggerated hips, her outline pulsing with energy. In Spain's La Gama cave, clay sculptures of voluptuous forms echo fertility, symbols found across Europe. These aren't accidents or afterthoughts. They're proof that women weren't just bystanders in these sacred spaces. They were active visionaries, shaping the narratives that bound their communities together. What does this mean for our view of prehistoric life? For starters, it shatters the myth of the lone male hunter-artist. If women were painting, they were likely passing down knowledge too, teaching younger generations not just how to mix pigments, but how to read the stories hidden in those strokes. Some researchers suggest the handprints themselves might be part of initiation rites, with mothers and daughters leaving their marks side by side, and those fertility symbols. They could represent more than just reproduction. In a world where survival hinged on understanding nature's cycles, depicting the female form might have been a way to honor the Earth's generative power, a prayer for abundance woven into the stone. This revelation changes more than just art history. It redefines how we imagine early societies. If women held roles as storytellers and ritual leaders, then survival wasn't just about brute strength. It was about collective wisdom, the kind that remembers which plants heal, which seasons bring migrating herds, and how to translate fear into something beautiful. Those caves weren't male domains, they were gathering places where every voice left its echo. So the next time you picture a cave artist, don't imagine just one figure in the shadows. See the circle of torchlight, the women grinding pigments, the elders guiding hands, the children watching wide-eyed, all adding their threads to humanity's oldest tapestry. Between the sweeping murals of bison and mammoths, something quieter but no less profound lingers on the cave walls, clusters of dots, zigzagging lines, nested curves, and ladder-like grids. At first glance, they seem out of place next to the vivid animal portraits, like footnotes scribbled in the margins of history. But what if these abstract signs weren't random doodles? What if they were the first sparks of a system, a way to record time, track resources, or even send messages across generations? Take the dots. In caves like El Castillo in Spain, they appear in groups, sometimes 3, sometimes 13, arranged in rows or scattered like constellations. One theory suggests these could represent lunar cycles, with each dot marking a night. Early hunters tracking migratory patterns would need to know when herds would arrive or when salmon might swim upstream. A lunar calendar etched in ochre would be as vital as a spear. Elsewhere, in France's Lascaux cave, dots clustered near painted horses, almost like tallies, perhaps counting successful hunts or the number of animals in a herd. Then there are the lines and grids. In some caves, parallel strokes crosshatch like woven baskets, while in others, branching lines resemble rivers or trails. Archaeologist Genevieve von Petzinger has catalogued 32 distinct geometric signs recurring across European caves, some so consistent they hint at shared meaning. A zigzag might symbolize water in one region, while a spiral could represent a journey or a sacred space. The most tantalizing possibility, these weren't just decorations. They might have been the building blocks of a proto-writing system, a way to convey ideas without spoken words. Compare this to the token systems of later ancient cultures, where clay shapes represented quantities of grain or livestock. Or consider indigenous message sticks, where notches and carvings held specific meanings. Early humans, it seems, were groping toward the same solution: how to make thought visible. Some researchers even see parallels between cave signs and symbols used by modern hunter-gatherers. The San people of southern Africa, for instance, use similar patterns in rock art to denote trance states or spiritual encounters. The real breakthrough would be if these signs formed a syntax, a way to combine symbols for complex meaning. In Chauvet Cave, red dots surround a painted owl, as if marking it as sacred. At Altamira, grids overlay bison, perhaps assigning them to a clan or a season. If these patterns could be deciphered, we might finally hear the voices of the artists, not just as creators, but as thinkers. That's the heart of the mystery. These caves aren't just galleries. They could be libraries, their walls whispering in a language we're only beginning to understand. Every dot, every line is a breadcrumb left in the dark, waiting for us to follow it home. There's a reason these ancient caves feel like stepping into a time machine. While wind and rain erased most traces of our ancestors' lives above ground, the cave's sealed environments acted as natural vaults, preserving not just paintings but entire moments. Take Lascaux's shifting styles. The oldest figures, etched deep in the cave's heart, show heavy, static animals painted in monochrome. Move forward a few thousand years, and suddenly the same walls burst with polychrome herds, their legs overlapping to suggest motion. It's like watching humanity's artistic awakening unfold in real time, layer by layer. But the real magic lies in the accidental snapshots. In France's Tuc-Dordabat cave, a set of adolescent footprints still winds through the clay, flanked by the skid marks of what might have been a dragged torch. Nearby, two perfect bison sculptures rise from the floor, their edges still bearing the fingerprints of the artists who shaped them. It's as if the scene was paused mid-ritual. A group of teenagers, maybe initiates, leaving their mark alongside the masters. Even the tools tell stories. At Altamira, archaeologists found worn-out pigment grinders and hollowed-out bones used as paint tubes, discarded exactly where they were last used. These aren't just artifacts, they're frozen glimpses of creative process, showing how patience and precision turned raw materials into masterpieces. What's astonishing is how much these caves preserve beyond art. In Romania's Coloboia cave, bare claw marks score the walls right beside human handprints, proof that these spaces were shared, contested, maybe even revered by multiple species. And in Spain's Cueva de Ardales, red stains on stalagmites suggest pigments were mixed directly with mineral-rich water dripping from the ceiling, turning the cave itself into a collaborator. This makes these spaces more than museums. They're ecosystems of creativity, where every smudge, footprint, and discarded tool forms a web of connections. When we analyze the manganese dioxide used in Chauvet's black paints, we're not just studying chemistry, we're retracing trade routes, since the nearest source is miles away. When we find child-sized handprints beside adults, we're seeing classrooms without walls where knowledge passed from one generation to the next. The caves didn't just preserve art. They preserved the very act of making meaning, a chain of creativity stretching back further than we ever dreamed. From the limestone caverns of Spain to the hidden grottos of Indonesia, a remarkable pattern emerges: human hands reaching across time and geography, leaving eerily similar marks. In Sulawesi, 40,000-year-old stencils of hands press against the rock, their ochre outlines mirroring those in El Castillo cave halfway around the world. Even more striking are the animals, the same sweeping curves of horses' backs, the same tense musculature of charging bulls, rendered with nearly identical techniques despite the artists never having met. This isn't coincidence, it's evidence of something profound, the universal blueprint of human creativity. Consider the parallels. In both Chauvet and Sulawesi's Ling Tedong, artists used the natural contours of cave walls to give creatures dimension, making them emerge from the stone like ghosts. Both traditions favored deep recesses, often painting in chambers that required crawling through narrow passages, and both left behind those cryptic symbols, dots, lines, ladders, as if following some shared mental template. How could such distant cultures arrive at nearly identical expressions? The answer might lie in our brains themselves. Cognitive archaeologists point to the symbolic explosion that occurred as Homo sapiens spread across the globe, a sudden flowering of art, ritual, and abstract thought. It's as if our species collectively woke up to the power of metaphor, realizing a bison could represent more than just food. It could embody strength, danger, or even the spirit of the hunt. But there's a twist. While the themes overlap, the details whisper about local worlds. In Europe, Ice Age artists painted mammoths and lions, creatures that roamed their frozen steppes. In Sulawesi, the canvases come alive with babirusas, a peculiar pig deer found only in those islands, and the dwarf buffalo called anoas. These weren't generic animals, they were neighbors, threats, and possibly spiritual guides. The handprints tell a similar story. In Borneo's Lubang Jaraji Saleh, some stencils show fingers deliberately folded, a gesture still used by local tribes today to signify grief or commemoration. The language of symbols was universal, but the dialects were distinctly local. This global thread does more than connect caves, it rewires how we see human development. For decades, scholars assumed art began in Europe before spreading elsewhere, but dating shows Sulawesi's paintings are just as ancient, proving creativity wasn't a single spark but a constellation of fires lighting up independently. That shared impulse to leave a mark, to say, "I am here," might be encoded in our DNA. Today, a child doodling on paper and a teenager tagging a wall are tapping into that same primal drive. The caves remind us that before writing, before cities, before borders, we were already speaking the same visual language, not because we copied each other, but because we share what makes us human: hands that shape, eyes that see meaning, and minds that can't help but turn the world into stories. The flickering glow of a torch against a cave wall did more than just light the way, it breathed life into the art itself. Soot stains and charcoal remnants tell us early painters didn't work under steady light, but in a dance of shadows, where flames transformed static images into something alive. Picture this: as firelight wavered, a painted bison's legs would seem to quiver, its muscles twitch, its eyes gleam as if watching you from the stone. This wasn't just decoration, it was prehistoric cinema, a way to make the unseen world pulse with movement. But fire's role went beyond spectacle. Those torch marks lining cave ceilings, some over 40,000 years old, trace paths through winding tunnels, showing how artists navigated deep into the earth. The heat and light didn't just reveal the walls, they changed them. In places like France's Rouffignac cave, researchers found that soot from torches mixed with the minerals in the rock, creating a glossy sheen that made paintings shimmer. Even the air itself became part of the art. In chambers where smoke pooled, figures would appear and disappear like visions, their outlines blurred by the haze. Fire also turned caves into gathering spaces. The warmth drew people together, not just to paint but to share stories, plan hunts, or pass down knowledge. In Spanish caves like La Pasiega, hearths sit just feet from elaborate murals, their embers still holding traces of burned bone and herbs, evidence of feasts or rituals held in the art's presence. And fire offered protection. Deep in the caves, the glow would scare off predators, turning these galleries into sanctuaries where creativity could flourish. The most ingenious touch, early artists used fire's limitations to their advantage. In Chauvet Cave, many paintings cluster in narrow alcoves where torches would cast exaggerated shadows, making the animals loom larger. Others appear on concave walls that catch and amplify light, so a single flame could illuminate an entire herd. This wasn't accidental. It was mastery, an understanding of how light shapes perception, how environment alters meaning. Today, we dim the lights for theater or spotlight a painting in a museum. 30,000 years ago, they were already staging experiences, proving that art wasn't just something to see. It was something to feel, to step inside, to remember long after the flames burned out. Among the towering bison and sweeping herds of horses, the cave walls hold smaller, quieter marks, tiny handprints pressed beside adult ones, clumsy animal outlines that wobble with the uncertainty of a child's grip. These aren't mistakes or afterthoughts. They're proof that cave art wasn't just the domain of skilled adult artists. Children were there too, their fingers tracing the same walls, their imaginations sparking alongside their elders. In caves like France's Gargas or Spain's Maltreviso, you can almost hear the echoes of their laughter, their whispers, their wide-eyed wonder as they dipped hands into pigment and left their mark on history. Some of the most telling evidence comes from delicate, finger-flutings, lines drawn by small hands dragging through soft cave clay. In Rouffignac Cave, nicknamed the Cave of 100 Mammoths, researchers found entire panels covered in these meandering trails, some so high on walls they must have been made by children lifted onto shoulders. At first glance, they might look like random scribbles, but look closer. Some follow the contours of adult-drawn animals, as if a child was practicing the curves of a bison's back. Others cluster in rhythmic patterns, suggesting play or perhaps participation in something deeper. In a few chambers, children's flutings intertwine with adult markings, creating collaborative compositions that span generations. This changes everything we thought about survival in the Ice Age. If children were present in these sacred spaces, it means art wasn't just about hunting magic or shamanic visions. It was about passing down knowledge, bonding the group, maybe even initiating the young into their roles. Imagine a mother guiding her daughter's hand to outline a reindeer, teaching her to observe the angle of its antlers or the thickness of its winter coat. Or a group of adolescents, their fingers tracing stories onto the walls as elders recounted legends of the great hunts. These caves weren't just galleries, they were classrooms without walls where every generation added its voice. Then there's the mystery of the child handprints found in caves like El Castillo. Some are so small they must belong to toddlers, their tiny palms pressed into the rock with adult assistance. Were these part of naming ceremonies, a way to welcome newborns into the clan's spiritual life? Or perhaps they were protective symbols, like prehistoric versions of inked baby footprints in hospital scrapbooks. The most poignant examples show children's prints overlapping with adults, their fingers interlaced in the pigment. It's a snapshot of connection, a tactile reminder that 30,000 years ago, love looked just like it does today, a hand holding a smaller one, saying, "You belong here too." What's striking is how these childlike marks challenge the myth that survival was purely adult work. Those crude drawings of horses with too many legs or mammoths with lopsided tusks weren't just doodles. They were steps in a cultural apprenticeship, proof that even the youngest members had a role in shaping their world. Today, we give kids crayons to express themselves. Back then, they were given ochre and torchlight, their creativity woven into the very fabric of their community's survival. Those tiny handprints remind us that culture isn't just passed down, it's grown, nurtured by every generation, starting with the smallest hands reaching for the wall. The act of painting in those dark, echoing caves might have been more than ritual or record-keeping. It could have been humanity's first therapy session. Picture the rhythmic scrape of charcoal against stone, the steady pulse of a fingertip tracing the same line over and over. In a world where danger lurked beyond every ridge, where the loss of a hunt or a loved one was constant, these caves offered something rare: control. Early humans couldn't command the weather or stop a predator's attack, but they could command the pigment, the line, the shape emerging under their hands. That simple act, transforming fear into form, might have been as vital to survival as any weapon. Modern neuroscience sheds light on why. The repetitive motions involved in cave art, grinding pigments, etching outlines, blending colors, mirror techniques used in contemporary art therapy to calm the nervous system. When our hands engage in rhythmic, creative work, our brains release dopamine and serotonin, chemicals that soothe anxiety and sharpen focus. For early humans living with the constant stress of survival, this biochemical shift could have been life-saving. A hunter who'd narrowly escaped a lion's claws might have processed that trauma by painting the beast on the wall, externalizing the terror until it became something he could confront and ultimately master. The caves themselves amplified this effect. Their isolation created a sensory cocoon, muffling the outside world's chaos. The flickering torchlight, the sound of dripping water, the smell of earth and ochre. All these elements could induce a flow state, that mental zone where time falls away and the mind quiets. Some chambers even show evidence of chanting or drumming, practices still used today to achieve meditative states. And the handprints, pressing a palm to cold stone, isn't just marking territory, it's grounding, a way to reconnect with the body when the mind is flooded with fear. This isn't just speculation. Look at the subjects they chose. Many paintings show wounded animals or confrontations between predators and prey, scenes that would have been deeply traumatic to witness. By recreating them, early humans might have been doing what trauma survivors do now, retelling the story until it loses its power. Even the abstract symbols, dots, zigzags, spirals, could represent attempts to organize chaotic emotions into patterns the mind could comprehend. The most striking parallel lies in the cave's collaborative nature. Unlike solitary modern art, these paintings were often communal projects, with generations adding to the same walls. Sharing the creative process would have strengthened social bonds, fostering resilience in a way that solitary survival couldn't. A clan that painted together didn't just share pigments, they shared burdens, turning individual pain into collective meaning. Today, we journal our anxieties or sketch our dreams, calling it self-care. 30,000 years ago, they did the same with torch smoke and crushed minerals, proving that healing isn't a modern invention. It's etched into our bones, as ancient as the first hand that reached for the wall, not just to say, "I was here, but I survived." Deep in the caves of Lascaux and El Castillo, something extraordinary happens when sunlight or torchlight strikes certain paintings at precise moments. The animals seem to awaken, their outlines glowing with an otherworldly precision. But this isn't just a trick of the light. Researchers have discovered that many of these artworks align with celestial events, their positions matching the constellations our ancestors would have seen overhead. Take the famous Great Bull of Lascaux. Its sweeping horns mirror the curve of the Taurus constellation as it appeared 17,000 years ago. Nearby, a cluster of dots mirrors the Pleiades star cluster, known to ancient cultures as the Seven Sisters. These aren't random placements, they're a celestial map painted in ochre and charcoal. The connection runs deeper than individual stars. In Spain's La Pasiega cave, a red stag painted high on a wall aligns perfectly with a shaft of sunlight only during the winter solstice, its antlers glowing like fire for those few precious minutes. Similarly, in Arizona's Crack in Rock cave, spirals carved into the stone become targets for dagger-like sunlight during equinoxes, marking the turning of seasons with razor-sharp accuracy. These weren't just artistic choices, they were survival tools. Early humans depended on knowing when herds would migrate, when plants would fruit, when rivers would freeze. By encoding celestial knowledge into cave walls, they created a permanent almanac, a way to pass down critical timing across generations without written language. What's truly remarkable is how these cosmic markers span continents. The same star patterns appear in caves from France to Indonesia, suggesting a shared human impulse to look upward for meaning. In Sulawesi's Ling Bulu Sipong, a hunting scene painted 44,000 years ago shows figures pursuing buffalo beneath what might be a depiction of the Southern Cross, a constellation still used for navigation in the Southern Hemisphere. Meanwhile, in Choco Canyon, spiral petroglyphs track the 19-year cycle of the moon, proving that astronomical observation wasn't just European, it was universal. This celestial artistry reveals a profound shift in consciousness. Early humans weren't just tracking time, they were weaving themselves into the fabric of the cosmos. A bison painted beneath a star pattern wasn't just food, it became part of a grander story, one where earthly and celestial realms mirrored each other. The caves became planetariums, their walls holding not just images of animals, but the very rhythms of the universe. Today, we check apps for weather or star positions. 30,000 years ago, they only needed to lift their eyes or step into the sacred dark to read the sky's endless story. The vibrant tradition of cave painting didn't vanish overnight, it faded like torchlight giving way to dawn. Around 12,000 years ago, as glaciers retreated and landscapes transformed, humans began trading nomadic lifestyles for settled farming communities. With this revolution came a seismic shift in artistic expression. No longer bound to the deep, sacred caves, people carried their creativity into the open air, painting on cliffs and carving into standing stones. The art itself became as mobile as their new lives, etched into tools, woven into textiles, and pressed into clay pots. This wasn't the end of creativity, it was evolution in action. Consider the symbolism behind this transition. In caves, art was communal and monumental, a collective project meant to endure. But the pottery shards and carved figurines of early agricultural societies tell a different story. These were personal objects, often buried with their owners or traded across distances. A painted pot might depict a family's harvest, while a carved amulet could symbolize protection for a single child. The canvas shrank, but the stories grew more intimate, reflecting a world where identity was no longer tied solely to the clan, but also to the individual. Yet something profound was lost in this shift. The caves had been more than galleries, they were portals to the unseen, where flickering light brought paintings to life. Outdoor art, no matter how beautiful, couldn't replicate that magic. A bison painted on a sunlit cliff lacked the eerie presence of one emerging from shadowed stone. Perhaps that's why later cultures still returned to caves for rituals long after they'd stopped painting there, as if the walls themselves held a power that couldn't be replicated under open skies. The materials themselves tell a story of changing priorities. Ochre and charcoal gave way to clay and flax, mediums that reflected new needs. A storage jar wasn't just art, it was a practical vessel for grain. A woven pattern wasn't just decoration, it reinforced fabric. This fusion of form and function marks a pivotal moment. Art wasn't separate from daily life anymore. It was part of the loom, the field, the hearth, but the legacy of those ancient caves never truly disappeared. Look closely at later artworks, and you'll spot echoes of the old symbols, dots that once represented stars now pressed into pottery as makers' marks, handprints that once claimed cave walls stamped onto ceramics as signatures. Even the stories endured, transformed. The epic hunts painted underground became myths told around fires, the animal spirits reborn as gods of field and flock. The most enduring lesson of this transition: humanity never stopped making art, we just changed how we carry it. Those early artists who mixed pigments in torchlight would still recognize the impulse behind a child's doodle on a modern classroom wall or a mural brightening a city street. The need to create, to leave a mark, to say, "This is my world," transcends time and medium. The caves may have fallen silent, but the conversation they started 40,000 years ago continues every time we pick up a brush, a chisel, or a stick of charcoal and make something new. Recent advancements in technology are peeling back the layers of time, revealing secrets hidden in cave walls for millennia. High-resolution 3D scanners, originally developed for medical imaging, now map every microscopic groove and pigment particle in caves like Lascaux and Chauvet with precision down to a fraction of a millimeter. What they've uncovered is astonishing ghostly outlines of animals buried beneath the visible paintings, faint charcoal sketches that were later revised, even entire compositions erased and replaced. In Spain's La Pasiega cave, multispectral imaging exposed a stunning palimpsest of art, a majestic stag painted over an older bison, which itself covered a series of cryptic dots. This wasn't a static gallery. It was a living canvas reworked across generations as beliefs and needs evolved. Artificial intelligence adds another dimension to these discoveries. Machine learning algorithms trained on thousands of cave art images can now detect patterns invisible to human eyes. In Indonesia's Sulawesi caves, AI analysis revealed that what appeared to be random smudges around hand stencils were actually deliberate blow marks, evidence that artists used their mouths to spray pigment in precise rituals. Elsewhere, AI has identified signature strokes, suggesting individual artists worked across multiple caves, their distinctive techniques recognizable like prehistoric fingerprints. The most mind-bending revelation: some caves show evidence of scaffolding systems not for one grand artwork, but for cycles of creation spanning centuries. These technologies are shattering old assumptions. Where scholars once saw single bursts of creativity, they now find layered histories. A single wall in France's Cognac cave holds 5 distinct phases of painting across 15,000 years, each style reflecting shifts in climate, fauna, and human culture. Thermoluminescence dating of torch marks proves some chambers were revisited for millennia, becoming pilgrimage sites where new generations added to the story. Even the pigments tell a dynamic tale. Chemical analysis shows artists sometimes repurposed older paintings, grinding existing ochre into new hues rather than starting from scratch. The implications are profound. Early humans didn't just make art, they curated it, debated it, transformed it. A bison painted during an ice age might acquire new meaning when later artists surrounded it with spears during a period of scarcity. Handprints faded by time could be refreshed during coming-of-age ceremonies. This fluidity mirrors how we interact with art today, reinterpreting classics, adding digital layers to street murals, even debating museum displays. The caves remind us that creativity was never frozen in time. It was and is a conversation across the ages, with each generation adding its voice to the chorus. Perhaps the most humbling discovery comes from light-sensitive cameras that detect the faintest traces of pigment. In dozens of caves worldwide, these tools have revealed vast, invisible galleries, areas where walls were once covered end to end with paintings that have faded to near nothingness. The scale suggests that what we've celebrated as masterpieces are merely fragments, the surviving whispers of a much grander tradition. Every scan, every algorithm, every new image peeled from the stone whispers the same truth. We've only just begun to read humanity's first sketchbook. The thrill of discovering ancient cave art sometimes comes with a shadow, the unsettling reality that not every painting is what it seems. Take the infamous case of Altamira, Spain's so-called Sistine Chapel of prehistoric art. When amateur archaeologist Marcelino Sanz de Sochuola first unveiled its breathtaking bison paintings in the late 1800s, experts accused him of forgery. The colors were too vibrant, the styles too advanced for what scholars then believed possible. It took decades and the discovery of similar art at Lascaux for Altamira to be vindicated. But the controversy left a lasting scar, revealing how quickly skepticism can turn to dismissal when new evidence challenges established beliefs. Not all disputes end in redemption. In the 1960s, the French cave of Glozul became a battleground of authenticity after a farmer stumbled upon strange engraved tablets and bone fragments. Some hailed them as revolutionary artifacts proving an unknown ancient script. Others pointed to inconsistencies in the carving's depth and weathering. Scientific testing later revealed modern tool marks, exposing Glozul as an elaborate hoax, one that had already seeped into textbooks and museum collections. The fallout was a wake-up call. Even well-meaning experts can be seduced by the allure of a groundbreaking discovery. The line between restoration and forgery can blur just as dangerously. In the early 20th century, overzealous conservators at Spain's cave of La Pasiega retouched faded paintings with modern pigments, irrevocably altering their chemical signatures. Later, at France's Ninox cave, flashlight-wielding tourists left layers of skin oil and carbon dioxide that accelerated the decay of millennia-old artwork. These weren't acts of malice, but they underscore a painful truth. Our desire to preserve or interpret the past can sometimes hasten its destruction. Today, cutting-edge tools like mass spectrometry and 3D modeling help separate fact from fiction, but challenges remain. When Indonesia's Sulawesi caves revealed hand stencils dated to 40,000 years older than Europe's celebrated art, some questioned the dating methods. Others pointed to suspiciously crisp edges in certain motifs. The debate isn't just academic, it shapes funding, tourism, even national pride. What's at stake isn't merely the authenticity of individual paintings, but our understanding of human creativity's origins. These controversies serve as a necessary counterbalance to wonder. They remind us that ancient art isn't a static relic but a living conversation, one that demands both reverence and rigor. Every claim of a newfound masterpiece should be met with curiosity and caution, because the past deserves more than our admiration. It deserves our honesty. Even as we uncover the secrets of ancient cave art, a silent crisis unfolds. These irreplaceable masterpieces are disappearing faster than we can study them. The very breath of visitors in France's Lascaux cave once carried moisture and microbes that spawned a destructive white mold, forcing its closure in 1963. But the threats run deeper than tourism. Rising temperatures and shifting humidity from climate change destabilize cave interiors, causing limestone walls to crack and pigments to flake away. In Spain's Altamira cave, colonies of bacteria called green patina spread across paintings like a slow-moving wildfire, devouring organic binders in the pigments. Scientists now battle these microscopic invaders with biocides, but the solution risks damaging the art it's meant to save. The irony is heartbreaking. For tens of thousands of years, these artworks survived ice ages and earthquakes, only to face existential threats from modern human activity. In Indonesia's Maros Pankep caves, chemical runoff from nearby farms accelerates mineral deposits that obscure hand stencils. Even well-intentioned conservation can backfire. Sealing caves to protect them alters internal climates that kept paintings stable for millennia. The urgency has birthed ingenious solutions. At Lascaux, a painstaking replica called Lascaux 4 recreates every brushstroke using 3D laser scans and pigment analysis, allowing millions to experience the cave without harming the original. Similarly, France's Chauvet cave, never open to the public, is preserved through a stunning facsimile where artists replicated the torchlight flicker that once brought paintings to life. Yet replicas can't replace the real thing. Each cave's unique acoustics, temperature, and geological quirks shaped how and why art was created there. Losing the originals means losing context. The way a bison painted in an echoing chamber might have spoken during rituals, or how handprints clustered near natural light shafts could mark gathering spots. The race to digitize caves offers hope. Projects like Spain's Neo Cave use augmented reality to project vanished paintings back onto bare walls, while AI analyzes deteriorating pigments to predict where damage might spread next. What's at stake isn't just art history, it's a lineage of human creativity stretching back to our very beginnings. When a cave painting fades, we don't just lose an image. We lose a voice from the dawn of consciousness, a testament to resilience, and a mirror showing how little our deepest impulses have changed. The walls whispered to them. Now they're whispering to us before the silence falls forever. There's a profound irony in the fact that 30,000 years ago, humans painted by torchlight to make sense of their world, while today we scroll through endless digital feeds, drowning in information but starving for meaning. Those ancient cave artists might seem impossibly distant from our modern lives, but their legacy holds urgent lessons. They remind us that creativity isn't just about decoration or distraction, it's a survival skill, as vital as food or shelter. In a world where algorithms dictate what we see and attention spans shrink by the day, the caves whisper a counterintuitive truth. Sometimes the simplest symbols carry the deepest weight. Consider the handprints. A single palm pressed in pigment says more than 1,000 social media posts. It's a declaration of presence, a raw and unfiltered "I am here" that transcends language and time. Modern life bombards us with curated personas and polished narratives, but those ancient marks remind us of the power in vulnerability, in leaving something imperfect but authentic. Imagine applying that lesson today. What if we spent less time crafting flawless online personas and more time leaving real, tangible marks of connection? The caves also teach us about focus. Early artists didn't have the luxury of multitasking. Every stroke demanded their full attention. Every pigment mix required patience. In an era of constant notifications and fractured concentration, their work stands as a testament to the magic that happens when we immerse ourselves completely. Neuroscientists now confirm what those artists knew instinctively. Deep engagement, whether in painting, storytelling, or problem-solving triggers flow states that reduce stress and sharpen cognition. The caves weren't just galleries, they were the first mindfulness retreats. Most strikingly, these ancient works challenge our obsession with utility. A bison painted deep in a cave served no immediate practical purpose. It didn't clothe or feed anyone, yet it endured, becoming a beacon of shared identity and resilience. Today, we often dismiss art as frivolous unless it does something, sells, educates, or goes viral. But the caves insist otherwise. Creativity is the glue that binds communities, the compass that helps us navigate uncertainty. When disaster strikes, it's not spreadsheets or stock prices people turn to for solace, it's music, stories, and images. The pandemic proved this anew, as murals bloomed on boarded-up storefronts and neighbors sang from balconies. Perhaps the most humbling lesson is in sustainability. Those artists used materials from their immediate environment, ochre from the earth, charcoal from the fire, and created works that lasted millennia without polluting their world. Compare that to today's digital detritus, servers guzzling energy to store billions of forgotten selfies, devices discarded for newer models. The caves ask us, what are we creating that will truly endure, and at what cost? In the end, these ancient galleries offer a mirror. They show us that despite all our technological advances, we're still the same creatures who once gathered in flickering light to share stories and make meaning. The tools have changed, but the impulse remains to connect, to wonder, to leave behind something that says, we were here. The question isn't whether we'll keep creating. It's whether we'll remember why it matters. The next frontier in cave art research isn't just about what's on the walls, it's about what's in them. Scientists are now extracting microscopic traces of DNA from paint residues, unlocking secrets hidden in the very pigments our ancestors touched. Imagine discovering that the ochre in a Spanish cave contains genetic material matching a tribe thousands of miles away, proof of ancient trade routes or migrations we never knew existed. In France's Pech Merle cave, researchers have already identified plant and animal DNA mixed into pigments, suggesting rituals where materials were chosen not just for color but for symbolic meaning. A smear of bare fat in paint might reveal connections to shamanic practices, while pollen grains could trace the seasonal movements of artists. This isn't just archaeology, it's detective work on a molecular scale, reconstructing lives from fingerprints too small to see. Meanwhile, neuroscientists are peering into a different kind of mystery, the brain itself. Studies using functional MRI scans show that when modern humans create art, specific neural networks light up, flooding the brain with dopamine and activating regions linked to problem-solving and emotional regulation. Now, researchers are asking, did cave artists experience the same rush of creativity? By analyzing the repetitive motions in cave art, the precise swirls of finger flutings or the rhythmic dot patterns, they're mapping how prehistoric minds might have entered flow states, those trance-like zones where time falls away. Early findings suggest that the very act of painting in flickering torchlight, surrounded by echoes, could have induced mild, altered states, blurring the line between ritual and neuroscience. But the biggest breakthroughs might come from artificial intelligence. Machine learning algorithms are scanning thousands of cave art images, detecting hidden patterns in brushstrokes and compositions that human eyes miss. In Indonesia's Sulawesi caves, AI recently identified a previously unnoticed signature style in hand stencils, slight variations in finger spacing that suggest individual artists worked across multiple sites. Other projects are using climate models to predict which undiscovered caves might preserve art, factoring in humidity, rock porosity, and even ancient vegetation patterns. It's like assembling a prehistoric treasure map where X marks caves we haven't found yet. The most tantalizing question, whether these paintings hold coded messages waiting to be deciphered. Linguists are applying techniques used to crack ancient scripts, searching for recurring symbol sequences that might form a proto-language. In Portugal's Escaural cave, a cluster of triangles appears alongside animal figures in the same order across different chambers. Could this be an early attempt at syntax, a way to combine symbols for deeper meaning? Similarly, 3D sound mapping reveals that certain symbols cluster where echoes are strongest, hinting at acoustic mnemonics, a way to play the cave like an instrument during storytelling. What's clear is that every new technology peels back another layer of the mystery. LiDAR scans uncover caves buried by millennia of sediment. Spectroscopy detects faded pigments invisible to the naked eye. Even the humble smartphone plays a role. Crowdsourced apps let hikers photograph potential art sites, expanding the search beyond academic teams. The future of cave art research isn't confined to dusty trenches or museum labs. It's a collaboration across disciplines where geneticists, neuroscientists, and AI specialists stand alongside archaeologists, all asking the same fundamental question: what does it mean to be human? The caves keep their secrets for now, but with each innovation, we're learning to listen not just to the echoes of our past, but to the whispers of what's still undiscovered. Standing before these ancient cave paintings, it's impossible not to feel the weight of time collapse, like reaching across thousands of years and touching hands with someone who laughed, feared, and dreamed just as we do. That handprint on the wall, it's not just a mark in pigment, it's a heartbeat frozen in stone. The bison charging across the rock isn't just a depiction of prey, it's a prayer, a hope, a testament to resilience. These artists weren't so different from us. They faced hunger, danger, and the unknown, yet they still carved out moments to ask the big questions. Who are we? Why are we here? How do we make sense of this world? What's startling is how little our answers have changed. Today, we might express ourselves through tweets or TikTok videos instead of ochre and charcoal, but the impulse is identical: to connect, to be seen, to leave proof that we existed. A teenager tagging a subway car and a Paleolithic hunter painting a mammoth are driven by the same primal need: I matter. The mediums evolve, but the message doesn't. Even our struggles mirror theirs. They painted their fears: lions, storms, starvation. We wrestle with ours: climate change, pandemics, inequality. The canvas shifts, yet the human story remains. But here's the real revelation: these caves challenge the myth of progress. We assume modern humans are more sophisticated, more advanced, yet the evidence whispers otherwise. Those artists mastered perspective, movement, and symbolism with nothing but torchlight and raw materials. They tracked celestial events without telescopes, mapped migrations without GPS, and built communities without social media algorithms. Their survival didn't hinge on technology alone. It thrived on collaboration, creativity, and the ability to turn fear into something beautiful. In many ways, they weren't our primitive ancestors. They were our equals, just dressed in different tools. Perhaps that's why these images resonate so deeply. They strip away the veneer of modernity and remind us of what's timeless. A parent guiding a child's hand to the cave wall becomes a teacher helping a student with homework. The circle of torchlight where stories were shared transforms into a family scrolling through photos on a tablet. The rituals change, but the bonds don't. When we look at these paintings, we're not just studying history, we're recognizing ourselves. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by the chaos of modern life, remember the caves. Remember that 30,000 years ago, someone sat in the dark, surrounded by uncertainty, and chose to create instead of despair. They left us a gift more precious than artifacts, proof that even in the hardest times, the human spirit doesn't just endure, it paints, it sings, it reaches out. And that's a legacy no amount of time can erase. From the depths of prehistoric caves to the glowing screens of modern labs, these ancient paintings have become more than historical artifacts. They're mirrors reflecting the unchanging core of what makes us human. Every bison traced in charcoal, every handprint pressed in ochre, tells a story not just of survival, but of the moment our species first dared to ask, what does it all mean? The same creative spark that led an artist to animate galloping horses across limestone walls now fuels scientists using artificial intelligence to decode their symbols, proving that curiosity is our oldest and most vital inheritance. What's extraordinary isn't just how much we've learned, but how much remains tantalizingly out of reach. Those geometric signs, dots, zigzags, ladders might be lunar calendars, sacred symbols, or even the first clumsy steps toward writing. The truth could be all three. Early humans didn't separate science, art, and spirituality the way we do today. A single red dot might track the moon's cycles while also representing a clan's ancestral spirit, its meaning shifting with context like words in a poem. This fluidity challenges our modern need for neat categories, reminding us that understanding the past requires embracing its complexity. The real gift of these caves isn't just knowledge, it's perspective. When climate change or conflict makes our future feel uncertain, these paintings whisper a powerful truth. Humans have always faced darkness, both literal and metaphorical. What saved us wasn't just sharper spears or stronger shelters, but the ability to transform fear into something tangible, to paint our anxieties on walls where we could face them, to turn star patterns into stories that gave chaos meaning. That's why these images still move us. They're not relics, they're roadmaps showing how creativity can light the way through even the longest nights. So as the torchlight of discovery continues to reveal new wonders, whether through DNA analysis of ancient pigments or AI reconstructing lost artworks, we're not just uncovering history. We're continuing a conversation that began 40,000 years ago when someone first mixed earth and water to say, "This is my world and I am part of it." The caves remind us that every generation stands between those who came before and those who will follow, each adding new layers to humanity's collective masterpiece. Your story, the marks you leave, the meaning you make there, the next strokes on a canvas that stretches far beyond any single lifetime. And that's the most astonishing revelation